So I don't know if the show don't tell rule is still accurate in writing. Bit controversial, but I'll break it down for you why I think that way. Hi, I'm Roshni Lamino. I am an actress, voiceover artist, fantasy novelist, former game writer, former touring singer songwriter. I've worn a lot of creative hats over the years, and at events, people usually ask me stuff about, how do I get started in writing? How do I do this? How do I do that? And so I just thought I would organize all of those thoughts onto this channel because it's just easier. And we'll talk about craft, we'll talk about creative life and other things, whatever comes up. It's it is what it is on this channel. We'll see what happens. So, show versus tell. I think this has probably been one of the main writing rules that's been ingrained in us over the years, right? It is bad to tell your reader things. You need to show it. You need, whenever possible, you need to demonstrate it. So, as an example, if you were going to tell something, you'd be like, Joe felt bad. If you were going to show it, you might say something like, uh, Joe tumbled out of bed, his stomach heaving, and crawled into the bathroom, barely making it, you know, to the toilet in time before he retched up the contents of his dinner or something. Sorry if that was gross. But you get what I'm saying. One is just like, this is how it is, and the other is a little bit more descriptive of what's going on with Joe and why he's feeling poorly and what he's trying to do. And it's interesting because let me back up here. So when I was writing the first couple books in my Kingdom Legacy series, this is around 2020 to 2022. And I'm pretty new writer, whatever. At that point, all I had written were screenplays, which are short and punchy and get to the point, right? And so I'm writing narrative prose, for the first time or in a long time. And my editor was reading Stephen King's On Writing at the time when he was editing my first couple books. Now, this is not to knock Stephen King because obviously he is a very good and accomplished writer. One of the things that he talks about in his book that my editor brought up to me, and we actually discussed it. We used to have a writing podcast. We actually discussed this on the writing podcast. Stephen King is not a fan of adverbs. Those are those ly words like slowly, frantically, quietly, He's not a fan of those. And he views it as lazy writing. So if possible, instead of saying, you know, uh, he walked quickly, you would say, um, he walked with purpose and no one could stop him from his destination or something like that. Just to show that he is walking quickly, right? And it's really funny because I think reading that book really influenced my editor, and he was like, "No, you have to take out all your ly verbs, or I'm sorry, ly words, and change it." And he would mark like all of them, like, "No, no, no, not this one, not this one." Um, and I did, like, I reworded a lot of things to work around the adverbs. But what's funny is I'm also an audiobook narrator. And at this point, I have narrated over 150 books, probably more like 200 at this point. And I've narrated both indie published books and trad published books. And I've noticed in all types of books, so it's not like indie authors are, being lazy, because trust me, as an indie author myself, we are very hard workers. But it's not a thing of lazy writing like indie authors are lazy versus trad published writers are lazy. It's not like that because in both styles, in both uh, columns, I guess, I have been seeing the rise of ly words, of adverbs, you know? In fact, it's coming up a lot in the romance sections where I've been narrating, and those are all trad pubbed. So if it's good enough for a traditionally published novel to use adverbs, why, as an indie author or as any kind of writer, am I not supposed to be using these adverbs? What's going on? Here's what I think it is. So Stephen King's book was published in 2000 on writing. It's a memoir of his writing career as well as writing advice, craft advice. It was written in 2000. It is now, as of this recording, 2026. Words evolve, language changes. And in 2000, what did we have? YouTube was still fledgling. We did not have TikTok. We did not have shorts videos in any fashion. I think, in fact, it's funny. I looked this all up and I don't remember. Yeah, Stephen King's On Writing was 2000. YouTube was 2005. TikTok came around in 2016. So yeah, I did write this down. Things like Instagram, that predates TikTok a little bit, but still that would have been after 2000. Why is this important? We had larger attention spans back in 2000, right? This is not me making it up. There's studies shown about the TikTokification of our attention spans, and you see these articles of, oh, do shorts videos make us have low, shorter attention spans and stuff like that? And it's been proven, right? Because we are used to consuming short form content, so we don't really watch. I mean, if you're watching this video, right, this is technically long form. That's most people don't do that, right? Although there also is a trend coming back to it, but that's neither here nor there. For purposes of this discussion, that is not part of it. My point being is that just like how language evolves, our attention has evolved. And I don't think modern readers would really, if they read, because they do say reading is a bit on the decline, I don't think modern readers necessarily want to spend the time reading something super flowery. Or if they do, they want a mix of stuff. I find, even as a reader, I don't always have the patience for something super flowery. I don't even have the time for anything that's like a super huge novel. I look at a novel like Game of Thrones and I'm just tired. I don't want to read something that big. And if I read something like, say, um, Tolkien or Patricia McKillop, someone who's very flowery in their writing, Juliet, I think how you say Marillier, um, they're very descriptive, but I don't mind reading them because I've read them before. And so my brain goes over it much faster. It treads those grooves a lot quicker. Whereas if it's a new author to me and they're super flowery and it's like 150 pages, I have to go, oh, okay, turn it on now. Let's concentrate. So even I can feel that TikTokification of our attention spans. And to that end, it probably helps with modern readers to be short and punchy, at least some of the time, than super flowery and descriptive and all that stuff. Because again, things change. And it's funny too, because even when you read different styles of writing, so for example, I was a journalism major, I was print journalism. And in journalism, you have broadcast, you have print, and you have magazine writing. And of all those three, the most flowery type that's going to be most like a, you know, novel or something is magazine writing because they have the space and they can expand and they can describe and they can be flowery in their descriptions. Whereas in print journalism, we will probably say something like, he walked quickly because you have, you know, 5 inches or something. Maybe if you're lucky, you can stretch it to like 5.5, but you also have to fit in the ad and the picture as well and the caption, so you only have so much space on a page, and so you're more conscious of your word count and your usage. That's not to say that print journalism wasn't descriptive, it was just sparser and it got to the point quicker. And I think the most famous example of tell, not show would be the Bible. And in fact, I saw this on Instagram recently. I do not remember, I am so sorry, which author argued this point. Um, I'd love to give you credit. If I remembered who it was, I would post it in the show notes if I can find it. But that was a while ago. So if somebody knows, feel free to let me know in the comments. I just don't remember who it was who posted it. But one author recently posited that, yeah, telling, not showing is okay. They did it in the Bible all the time. And if it's good enough for the Bible, it probably should be good enough for us. And when you think about it, thinking about the Bible, okay, bye, strictly as literature, not as like a religious text. Um, Random aside, my favorite English teacher said if you only ever read two things in the world, read the Bible and read Shakespeare because everything is derivative of those two works. And he is correct. I have read a lot of Shakespeare, not all of Shakespeare, but most of him. And I have read the Bible, and you can see the parallels when you watch other movies and films and read other books. You can see where they're pulling things from, and you're like, whoa, crazy. It's cool. So, speaking of, oops, cat, what are you doing? Oh, my word. These guys are insane today, and I'm very sorry for the interruption. Thanks, Riley. Um, he's looking at me like butter won't melt in his mouth, and I'm trying to go, where was I? Yeah. But if you look at the Bible as literature, it is very much tell, not show, and it doesn't even describe things. Like it it doesn't really describe what Jesus looks like. We can infer based off of historical record what people looked like in that area, but it doesn't say, he was 6'1", dark hair, dark eyes, olive skin. He doesn't describe things. Um, and if you read it, it's very much like a journalistic piece. It's like, you know, the the people did this and they were told this and then they did this and this is what happened and that is that. It's not like it's not flowery. It's not like, I'm trying to think, like say the 10 commandments. It's basically like, God said, Moses, go up on this hill. So Moses went on the hill and God said, here's the commandments, but it's not like, God called forth Moses and Moses thought at the foot of the mountain, should I heed the call? And then, after a 10-hour strenuous journey, like it doesn't describe his like trek up the mountain. You know what I mean? It just says he went up and got the tablets. It's not like, and then rock by rock, bit by bit, sweat down his brow. Like it doesn't do that. And honestly, if the Bible was that descriptive, it would be way, way bigger, you know? Back at my old church, we used to joke, what's the shortest sentence in the Bible? Jesus wept. You know what I mean? But like modern day sensibilities, if you say show not tell, you wouldn't say Jesus wept. You'd say, you know, and as tears formed in our Savior's eyes, he contemplated the masses and felt, you know, water drip down his chin or so. I don't know. I'm just being silly, but you get what I'm saying, right? It's very much a point one, point two, point three bullet point, the way it's written. And it's very tell, not show. I don't know why that is, and I don't know where the convention came up in later life that we had to be descriptive instead of just telling things. But there you go. It is what it is. So, all of this to say, my point is if you want to use an adverb, I think it's fine. If you want to be more descriptive, I think it's fine. I think the best mix, especially for fiction, nonfiction, of course, is another story. I think for fiction writing, your best bet is a mix of both, for sure. And just remember that language and tastes evolve. I had a review of one of my books where somebody thought that um, I used big words or something like that. And I was just kind of writing in a style and language of the stuff that I had read growing up. You know, you want big words? Oh my gosh, go look at Tolkien, right? And that's a great example. I'm not going to write in the style of Tolkien because words and language evolve. And even things that we would have understood a few years ago, I can't use anymore because it's misunderstood. Funny example. I really wanted to use the phrase brown study. And I actually did in my first book, Brown Study. Brown study, if you look it up, it's still around. It basically just means lost in thought. He's in a brown study. He's like, it's like that. And I ran it by two people, my editor and another person. And my friend just doubled down on the phrase brown study. She thought it sounded like he was constipated and in the bathroom. And I was like, no, it's a legit phrase and this is what it means. And she doubled down so hard. And we're also the same age. So I'm like, okay, if you haven't heard this phrase and we're the same age, what does that mean? You know what I mean? Like, because I would have assumed we were growing up around the same time, so you would have been exposed to this phrase. She had never heard it, and she just thought it was the most hilarious thing ever, and I thought, "Oh my gosh, if she's reacting like this about Brown study, what are other readers gonna think?" It is a bit archaic. I don't think anybody people would just be like, "Yeah, he looks lost," or something. They're not gonna say he was in a Brown study. So you do have to remember that things evolve and change and pivot accordingly. Who knows? Maybe in a few years we will hate adverbs again and describe everything, in three sentences. But for now, we'll just get in and get out quickly because that's what the sensibilities of our current audience and their attention span are. So I don't know. What do you think, though? I would love to hear your thoughts. I feel like this might be a bit of a debatable issue as far as showing versus telling. So, which camp do you fall into and why? Let me know in the comments. If you like this video, please share it with your friends. You know where all the buttons are to, follow and subscribe and all that good stuff. Huh. What else? What else? If you want to read my books, there will be links in the show notes below. If you want to keep the discussion going, I have a Discord. Also links below. Most importantly, create your art. The world needs more art right now. I'll talk to you later.